live from Sister Basebone Studio. Urban Teachers Lounge is a platform for bridging the gap between educational scholarship and classroom teachers. Voices will include teachers, administrators, educational scholars, community members, and activists.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Urban Teachers Lounge. I am your host, G. Fumilayo DeVoe. This podcast is unapologetically for Black teachers, unapologetically by Black teachers. The purpose of the program is to build a bridge or to bridge the gap between educational scholarship and classroom teachers. With that said, this week, I'll be talking to you. I'll be discussing my favorite person, scholar, bad person, Dr. Barbara Sizemore. So go on and grab your cup of coffee and let's talk about this here. So, who is Barbara Sizemore? I'm sitting here, as I've told you before, I'm a teacher and I'm also a student. And in the midst of my studies, I came across Barbara Sizemore because of my godmother, as a matter of fact. She was studying Mary McLeod Bethune, and she told me, since she already had Mary McLeod Bethune together, to go ahead and look at Barbara Sizemore. So I'm like, who is this Barbara Sizemore? So I'm going to start with reading a little bit about her. This is from her book, her last book, Walking in Circles, The Black Struggle for School Reform. So I'm going to start this session with a quote from the great, and we know him, the great Asa Hilliard III. He says, Dr. Barbara Sizemore was involved in the struggle for academic and cultural excellence, successfully for many decades. Few educators can match her record of excellence in teaching, research, theory building, institution building, and political activism. Barbara's contribution to education and to African liberation are nothing short of colossal. She was a superior educational leader whose mere presence invoked awe and respect. So if Asa Hilliard said this thing about her, you know she was bad. And I think I remember reading in some of my research behind her, she talked about Asa Hilliard being her mentor, even though he was younger than she was, but they both did some fabulous work for African American people in general and Black children specifically. And then the next quote that I want to use comes from the foreword from another fabulous scholar, Dr. Carol D. Lee. Y'all need to look her up. So Dr. Lee says that Barbara Ann Sizemore stood as a giant in the forest. Everyone who knew her well or occasionally had vivid memories of a woman warrior who always entered the room to make sure that the rights and needs of peoples of African descent and the poorest among us, especially the children, were placed front and center. She had no fear, none. She was filled with deep compassion and an intellect of unprecedented capacity. In one sense, she could be considered a Renaissance woman, a high priestess with the gift of second sight who mastered many intellective disciplines. Okay, I don't have my glasses on now. Come on. Regardless of the topic, you would be assured that Barbara would bring significant knowledge and a distinct, well-informed point of view. And then I'm going to give you one more thing, since you do not have this book right now in front of you, but I want you to go out and buy it because it's well worth your money. The preface the preface of the book here, Walking in Circles. This is actually her speaking. And so this part says, this is her telling us what she did and her purpose. My research is based on the following beliefs. 1, all children can learn. 2, race, poverty, gender, class, family configuration, crime, or violence do not prevent students from learning what they are motivated and inspired to learn, especially when taught by superior, committed teachers and parents. And 3, ordinary teachers can elevate and accelerate, learning in children from the most disadvantaged backgrounds if those teachers know what they are teaching and understand how their learners process information and apply it. So I start there with those 3 things because Barbara Sizemore walked the walk and talked the talk. You know, in my research around her life and her legacy, she's everywhere. If you Google her, I would advise you Google her. She's on YouTube. You can see her legacy where she's speaking to other scholars, to teachers. She's having conversations at conferences. If you look in scholarly libraries, meaning college level libraries, or Google Scholar, which is also your friend. Google Scholar, there are a number of essays and books and articles and research that she has done. She was she started as a teacher, and she moved up. She became a principal. She became a director of a school, a pilot school, which you can find that information in this book. She went on to become the first African-American female superintendent of a major urban school district, which happened to be DC Public Schools, which is, I'm a proud graduate of DC Public Schools. And then she went on after that experience to go into the college and became dean, a professor, researcher, community builder. I mean, for those of us that are in the classroom, it was a blessing to find her name, to actually know who she is, to study who she is, and it was very encouraging because Sizemore was. She came up in the era of Jim Crow. She came up in a time when the sign said black teachers need not apply, white teachers only. She came up in a time where when she went to a college campus, blacks could not stay on campus. We had to stay off campus. And then she came through the period of the civil rights movement. So it is very encouraging, particularly in an era, a time such as this, that we have to call out what has been failing, or how our children of color specifically, have not been given a fair shake, right? So we talked about, if you think about Brown versus Board of Education, the entire point of that, so-called, was equality, educational equality. And it turned to be something else. I believe we lost a lot more according to even Sizemore, we lost more than what we gained. In the meantime, we still have children that need to be educated. And we still have teachers that need to teach them. And, of course, the purpose of this podcast is to encourage us. So to look at someone like Barbara Sizemore, you have someone who did this work, who fought for rights, who was on the front line, and that is always, for me, it is a calming to have eldership and leaders and people who have gone on before, our ancestors who have gone on before, to guide us and remind us why we're doing this. So I wanted to really talk about a few of her beliefs, a few of her pieces. So the one thing, I said she was the first African American female superintendent. But the other thing I want to talk about is she was a firm believer of principles as the instructional coach. So it's interesting to have principles, and I've worked for a number of them. In 16 years, I've had my share of principles. And it's interesting to work for a principal that either never taught in the classroom at all, that's a whole nother podcast, or you forget who you're teaching, or you're there because of the title. And you miss the point. I think all principals should remember why they became principals. And I'm assuming, of course, that they became principals to help the children. And in helping the children, you prepare a place, a safe space for the teacher. And in order to do that, you are compassionate, one. You understand what's happening. You understand institutionalized racism and how we play a part in it. And you also understand being an instructional coach. You are the lead instructional teacher. You are that person. And so she believed in that. And that gave me hope, too, because it made me remember, like, yeah, my expectation of a principal is correct. I expect a principal to lead, remembering that we're here to get the best out of our kids, to grow our kids completely, holistically, mind, body, soul, academically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, all of those things. And then the next thing that really was striking for me is she believed that the standardized test was the new lynching tool. And I said that slowly because I want that to seep in. Barbara Sizemore said in, I believe it was the 80s, definitely in the 90s, that standardized testing is a new lynching tool against children of color, period. So as I was researching her, I was like, what did you mean by that? What were you thinking about? How did we land on this? And then there was a period where I found some research where she switched, and it became the lynching tool was clearly still a lynching tool, but she moved to, if I can't beat this, because institutionalized racism is real. If I can't beat this, how then can I prepare my kids? And the decision she made was moving to extra support. Giving our kids, thinking that if we give kids extra time to read, to do math, to do what they needed to do, test prep, and then, of course, creating curriculums. And she does have a curriculum that she even created. I think for me, it was difficult reading that because I have been teaching since the No Child Left Behind. And within that No Child Left Behind, standardized testing has gone to a whole nother level from when she was talking about in the early 90s and late 80s. And to see the watering down of education and classroom teaching, it's watered down to, we need to teach to the test. We test, we teach to the test, then we test again, then we teach test prep, then we test prep the teaching and teaching the test. It's ridiculous. So I was curious to see how she landed there. And I think, you know, we make decisions, we do what we think is the best thing. But the beauty of her with dealing with that, she came to a place of understanding that we also need to include African culture. You know, a part of teaching our children and getting them what they need is to show them in the curriculum. Where are they? Which that goes back to understanding Dr. Asa Hilliard, because he too believed that our kids needed to see themselves in the curriculum as well as everything else. So that was a major issue or a major part of her research. And she went on to study and to research different schools that were successful and what did they do. It is not an anomaly for a black child to be successful academically, to pass a test. That is not an anomaly. If we give them what they need, they can do it. If we believe that they can do it, they will do it. And so I definitely, that resonated with me. And then I think, you know, so I'm just looking over my notes here, and I'm thinking of making sure that I got to all the main points that I wanted to bring out. I think the next thing I did want to speak about was, it's a story of this book. So I have two books in front of me. The one is called Walking in Circles, The Black Struggle for School Reform. And that's what I've been speaking of from that one. And then the other book that I have is The Ruptured Diamond, The Politics of Decentralization of the District of Columbia Public Schools. And this book basically was her dissertation, I believe. And she talks about the struggles that she had in D.C. public schools as the superintendent, and didn't understand all the politics that went around. D.C. is a political place, and there is a lot of politics around D.C. public schools because D.C. is not a state. It is a territory, which means the government actually, specifically Congress, actually has input on D.C. public schools. So she didn't understand that. So as I was studying her and really I was the reason why I did this deep dive study on Barbara Sizemore is, one, I had a paper that I needed to do, and we were supposed to do a case study. And I decided she was a good person to check out. You know, I enjoyed the little bit that I read about her, and so I continued. So this is the reason why I have so much information on her. But when I bought this book, The Ruptured Diamond, I put it on the bookshelf and went on about my business. And as I was going through my life as a teacher and researching the displacement of black teachers and just the struggles of black teachers that I had no idea about, where we landed after Brown versus Board. That's a whole nother podcast. It was very difficult. It was very traumatic, actually. And one day I picked her book up, and apparently I did open it before. You know I kind of skimmed through it and reviewed it, but I didn't look at the first page. And the first page, I didn't realize that I have in my possession a signed copy of this book. And not only is her name in it where she signed it, but she asked a question that I often have to think about. I really have to take a picture of this and put it on my desk just to remember. She says, "Are you committed to the struggle?" Teaching, being a teacher, growing our young people, growing our community, remembering why we're doing it. Our children are our future. If we don't teach them, how are they going to be able to sustain in adulthood? And to read that, are you committed to the struggle? Ooh, that's some hard words. That's when your elders pull you to the side and say, baby, yes, I know they're doing this and the people did that. I understand. But are you committed to the struggle, right? In my preaching voice. I know you heard that, right? So I just want to encourage you all today to look at Barbara Sizemore. This is Black History Month. It doesn't matter to me because Black History is 365 days out of the year, and 366 on leap year. But to start my podcast, my very first podcast, I think it is timely. It is appropriate to use Sizemore. She is my ancestor guru. She is that angel that always helps me when I go to work, when I go to speak, when I go to conferences. I think about this is the path, this is the trail that she blazed, and I'm able to walk on it, and you're able to walk on it as we go to our next level. So I will be including at the end of the, probably on my page, I will include sources that I wanted to share with you. So I'm going to give you the name of the two books. There are a couple of articles that I think are pretty good to get an overview of who she is and how she worked this thing. So I'm definitely going to leave that for you all to read, and maybe we'll come back to it. And my last thing before I go, I do want to share some closing thoughts. This is going to be some food for thought, because again, she wrote this book in early 2000 on her deathbed. She died of cancer. And I have opinions about cancer. I can't say that. This is a family show. But this book was published in 2008. So I do want to say in 2008, this is what she said about the education system, and it is still true, I think. The curriculum of America's education system is filled with distortions, omissions, and false statements regarding the African and the African American. Experience and education have convinced me that schools can change if the actors inside it are committed to high achievement as a high priority and are willing to work together to achieve that end. The purpose of walking in circles is to stress the importance of the imputation of Black inferiority and to encourage a spirit of struggle against white supremacy. And so one of the things that she says even in this book is, if we do not acknowledge the racist practices and the racist systems that are the leaders and the controllers of our education system, particularly as it relates to children of color, if we do not acknowledge this, we will continue to walk in circles. So let's make Barbara Sizemore proud of us. Let's take her legacy, what she left for us. Let's take that to the next level. May it be food for your soul. And I'm going to add, because I'm looking at his name in front of me, let's also remember Dr. Asa Hilliard, a professor at Georgia State, who was also another phenomenal scholar. And that will have to be another podcast where I really talk about his work around urban education. Let's remember them and use them to gain strength when we are going through the tough times in the classroom, right? So I'm very excited that you are here. I'm glad you were here with me today. I hope that you share this podcast with your community of teachers and scholars and activists. And I love to hear from you. Please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Podomatic, and leave your comments and suggestions. Until we meet again, peace, power, and progress.